Hi everyone. In this part of the module, we're going to think critically about a really important question. What does it mean to recover from mental illness? We often use the word recovery as if it's very clear, simple, straightforward. And we use it all the time in medicine, like saying we recovered from the flu or we're recovering from a broken bone. But you'll soon see the concept of recovery is pretty complex when it comes to mental illness and sometimes even misleading. Understanding the nuance here helps us think differently about the diagnosis and treatment of people with mental health challenges. In your Canvas module, I've assigned the article, The Myth of Recovery from Mental Illness. And in this video, we'll look at the arguments made by David Whitwell and connect David's points to recent statistics about relapse and reoccurrence of mental health challenges. For most people, recovery means going back to who you were before the onset of illness. If you get sick, you get treated, and you recover. And for physical health, that often makes sense. But with mental health, it's a bit more complicated. Patients, families may ask doctors and psychiatrists, when will I recover? When will I feel better again? When will I get back to who I was? Doctors or even well-intending family members may offer reassurance, of course you'll get better, just may take some time, because they want to provide hope. But as you'll see, David Whitwell argues that in mental health, this back to normal idea doesn't always match reality. Whitwell and his team interviewed people who had labeled as recovered, and here's what he found. Even those who said they'd recovered described continuing problems like lingering symptoms, a low stress tolerance, unemployment, stigma, difficulty in relationships, and many said, "I will never be the same person again." Others preferred to call themselves survivors, a term that emphasizes the ongoing challenges and not a return to this pre-illness state. And even when professionals viewed patients as recovered, few felt that way themselves. They described challenges and confidence and a lifestyle that made them feel different from their old self. Some patients noted that this change made them feel less than who they were before, and others noted that this change meant they'd transformed in ways that gave them resilience and a new perspective on life. Whitwell's observations align with what research tells us today. Research shows that approximately 50% of people who have their first episode of major depression will experience another episode at some point. And those who have had multiple past episodes of depression face an even stronger risk of reoccurrence. And importantly, many people in remission from depression report lingering symptoms like low mood and less energy. These residual symptoms are not just nagging, they're often a strong predictor of future episodes of depression. When it comes to substance use challenges, it's important to know that relapse is common. It's not unavoidable, but it's common. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the overall relapse rates for substance use disorders are estimated to be 40 to 60% are comparable to relapse rates for other medical conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, and asthma. For specific substances, the relapse rate is even higher. For example, studies show heroin relapse rate reach nearly 78%, alcohol 68%, and cocaine 62%. Yet, remission is possible. For instance, according to a secondary analysis of the Canadian Community Health Survey data, which includes a nationally representative sample of 25,113 Canadians over the age of 15, found that 68.4% of people with a lifetime history of substance use had achieved remission. This rate was actually higher than the remission rate of bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and major depressive disorder, but similar to generalized anxiety disorder. However, only 9.8% of participants with any lifetime of psychiatric disorder met the researchers' criteria for optimal well-being, compared to 24.1% of participants who had no history of mental illness. These numbers remind us that relapse is not rare, and it's often a part of the recovery journey. This doesn't mean that treatment is failing, healing, it means that recovery is non-linear, requiring ongoing support, adaptation, and continued compassion from both mental health providers and self-compassion for those living with mental illness. So why does this matter? Whitwell argues that the way we talk about recovery can create unrealistic expectations. If patients are told that they will fully recover, they may feel disappointed or even ashamed when they don't return to their old self. And professionals too may view treatment as a failure if full recovery doesn't happen. Instead of thinking of recovery as this end state goal, Whitwell suggests thinking of it as a process of coping and adaptation. Someone who experiences a mental illness can still build a meaningful life despite their challenges. Whitwell also highlights something important. Sometimes the changes brought on by mental illness, although painful, can cultivate resilience, greater empathy, and even wisdom. Recovery then isn't just about symptom elimination. It becomes about transformation. And because of this, it makes sense why some people preferred the language of surviving or living with mental illness rather than recovering from it. Clinicians need to be honest about relapse rates, but they can also be hopeful, showing that relapse is not failure, but a part of the recovery journey. Support systems should emphasize long-term management, not just acute care for mental health. Patients may benefit from refining their definition of recovery from not as never having symptoms again, but as gaining valuable coping skills, finding stability, exploring their meaning and life's purpose, and living true to their values. The concept of cultural humility, which you'll explore in this week's module, matters here too. Just as symptoms will potentially look different across cultures and communities, expectations for recovery may also look different. What counts as doing well must be understood within the individual's social context. David Whitwell's article challenges us to think critically about what recovery means in mental health care. Should we shift our focus to helping people live well with mental illness rather than aiming to eliminate it? The statistics covered in this video represent a challenge for mental health professionals and us as individuals. If almost half of people relapse at some point in their recovery journey, how do we design care that supports people and holds space for growth even when symptoms reoccur? Finally, we should consider when we talk about recovery, are we risking setting up strict definitions that may exclude or stigmatize people who don't fully recover in the clinical sense but continue to live meaningful lives? Whitwell's point isn't to deny hope from recovery. It's to encourage a more realistic and human-centered way of thinking about mental health. As you reflect on the Whitwell article, consider this question. What do you think recovery should mean in the context of mental health? We'll continue this conversation in this week's discussion board, where you'll have the opportunity to share your thoughts and comment on your classmates' perspectives. I'll see you in the module.